Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Experts at Design Thinking, making your ideas come to life. Before we get started, I want to give the biggest shout out ever to Deborah and Joanne, both Olivia and Adrian's mom. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Adrian, if you just turn your mic and cam on, you'll come on stage. We'll give you a second. There we go. Welcome. Well, I am such a mama's boy, so I'm so happy that both your moms are here and listening. This is the first time they've listened to both their daughters' professional talk. So here we go. Okay, Adrian, let's start with you. In brief, what is design thinking?
Sure. So design thinking is a framework for problem solving. Okay. It is the process in which we make sure we understand the people in the problems, ideate, come up with big ways or possible solutions, and then vet it out beginning to end. So for me, it's been my career essentially for 15 years, starting with who are our users, who are the people that we are trying to solve a problem for, and then motivating our stakeholders to align on those problems and be very intentional about how we solve them.
Over to you.
Yeah, I think Adrian summed it up beautifully, but design thinking is basically the process of taking your end user or your ideal client, your target audience, whatever you call them in your industry, and putting them at the focus of your actions and outputs.
Cool. So now that we know what it is, what makes it successful? How do we determine that success? And Olivia, you're number one here. Go, you're up.
So design thinking is great, again, for finding solutions that will fit the needs of your end user. So by really understanding what they want and who they are and what they need, you can create solutions that they're going to use and adopt and that are actually going to solve the challenges they face. So it's great for getting that quick solution by doing the work first to understand who you're solving for and not having to do a whole bunch of iterations and reworks as things end up not being adopted. It's almost a guarantee for adoption of your solution.
Yeah. So I'll add to that. So two things make design thinking successful. It is one, so to Olivia's point, your end user, but two other things help with this. It is alignment on the problem. So, I've worked for big companies, and if you ask everybody in the room, they'll give you something different. There's no alignment. So then there's no accountability and there's no process, right? And then the next thing I would say is big ideas. People often get stuck on the first idea or maybe even the second idea, but they're not really pushing the limits, right? That's your common response zone. You have to get out into these other big picture ideas to actually find a really good solution. Even if you can't get to that star, you can get real close to it.
So I'm super guilty of this, but how do you prevent teams from jumping in and solving your problem before you even explore and understand the problems and challenges you have? And Adrian, we'll go with you first.
Okay, so this is common, right? By the time they get to research, they are like, we're ready for usability testing. No, let's walk this all the way back. For me, I just play dumb and act like I have no idea what anybody is talking about. And show me how we know this is the problem, right? Show it to me. And when you start to ask people those kinds of questions, they're like, oh, you know what? We really don't know. And then we start thinking, do you really want to make multi-million-dollar decisions on best guesses and assumptions? So let's walk this back.
Cool. Olivia?
Yeah, I think the word Adrian just used, assumptions, is huge. Design thinking is all about challenging those assumptions. And there's things that we often will assume about our end users and actually turning those over on their heads and determining, is that true or is that something we just assume? And there's a great quote that I always use that if you think it's time consuming or expensive to do your research, imagine how time consuming and expensive it is not to. So again, coming back to creating things over and over again because they aren't fitting the needs or solving the problem of your end user.
Exactly. So, my new favorite hashtag walk it back.
You know what's funny? So there are articles out all the time, and I love reading these, of all the worst performing products ever. And when you look at that list, you're like, that's why. That's why you failed. I can guarantee you nobody talked to a person before they put that out.
Interesting. I'm going to have to Google that after this session. So now that we know what it is, we know how to walk it back. How do we start the process? Like, what's the first thing you guys would recommend doing when it comes to design thinking? And Olivia, let's go with you.
So I always start with the personas. Who are the people that you are trying to solve for, and getting to know those people, whether it's through interviews or whether it's through surveys or user research or all of the above. But beginning with those people. Who are the people that you are delivering a product or service or solution to, and really getting to know them. So taking that into putting yourself in their shoes and really getting to understand what are their goals, what are their challenges and pain points, what do they value, what do they fear, and finding the best way to get to know that person.
And I would say right in step with that is asking the client or the stakeholder, why do you care? Right? Why are we here? What are you trying to get out of this? What does success look like? And what are you going to do with it? Right? And then start to define their goals, because a lot of times as researchers and designers, we create things, but we never really ask the client or the stakeholder, why are we even here? So then you come back with research and they're like, great, I don't care. I should have asked that in the beginning. So making sure you understand, why are we here? Are you just trying to prove a point, right? Are you checking a box? Are we doing a redesign? Why are we here?
Exactly. And not to, this is a Women in Cloud Summit. So let's talk about why women in tech need to adopt design thinking as a tool for innovation. Where do they start? What does that look like? And Adrian, you're up.
One of the things that I love about design thinking is it gives everybody a platform to speak. And oftentimes, unfortunately, women tend to kind of sit off to the side, let other people run the conversation, or people talk over them and their ideas or their assessments never come out. Design thinking gives everybody a platform to speak. So during ideation, everybody has to do that. Everybody has to critique. Everybody has to ask questions. Everybody has to align. And that's one of the best things about that. It levels the playing field. As a researcher, I can go into a room of C-suite executives. Listen, we're all on the same playing field right now, but we have a job to do. And I think it just kind of makes it even for everybody.
Yeah, I love that point, Adrian. When I'm doing design thinking, we always talk about psychological safe zones. So creating those spaces that everyone feels they can contribute and they can share their ideas and have their voice heard. And I think when it comes to women, specifically in any industry, design thinking is all about empathy and putting ourselves in the shoes of our end users, our clients, our stakeholders. And I think naturally women are often very empathetic. So this is a way that you can take those skills that women kind of often inherently have and put them into a really tactical, useful way of improving your solutions and your outputs.
Great. So let's shift gears for a little bit and say, let's imagine you have a team without designers. How do you implement design thinking principles into projects when you have no one there? Olivia, you're up.
So I think anyone can do design thinking. I think it's all about we can all put ourselves in the shoes of someone else. So if you don't have someone who's a design thinking expert, think about how you've been impacted in similar situations that you're dealing with, or how you have been involved in a problem that you wish had a more human-centered solution. So I think, again, it doesn't take an expert. It's about getting started and getting started with that human-centered approach.
Absolutely. So, there are a couple of things to this. So one of my favorite exercises is teaching people how to sketch. You don't need to be a designer to sketch. As a matter of fact, people are terrified of even putting something on paper. They feel like they're going to be judged. So I do a whole exercise on just teaching people how to sketch, because that's not just a designer's skill set, right? We have to get to where we're visualizing what we're doing. And sometimes you don't have the words to tell the story, but you can draw it. So, even without a designer, people can sketch. You're not using high fidelity prototypes in a design thinking workshop anyway, right? So just get people doodle, draw. Let's think about it out loud.
I tell people I failed art in 6th grade, and that was like my biggest achievement, is failing art. And even I can prototype. So if I can do it, you can do it. So
Yeah, no, I would.
Just circles, squares, triangles. That's it.
I know, yeah, that's all it is.
When I do design thinking courses, often the first exercise we have people do is draw your problem. What does the challenge you're here to solve look like? How would you draw that? And people's first reaction is, oh my God, I can't draw. We're not used to having our markers and our blank paper in our work these days. And so I think it's getting people into that mindset of, it can be stick people, it can be lines and squares. It just draw your problem, put that into a creative way. And you can tailor and iterate those pieces along the way. And there are programs out there to help you beautify them in the end. But I think, as Adrian said, it's the low fidelity. It's starting with a very basic drawing and doing that through all of the phases of design thinking.
So on that same topic,
I wanted to add to that, Blake. The reason why that's important is because, Olivia, you probably see this all the time. A lot of times people are using the same words, but they don't mean the same thing. So you have to draw it so people can kind of get to the same conclusions and the same understanding. And keep a glossary, right? When you say that word, what does it mean? When you say that concept, what does that mean? Because you often find out in all of these engagements, it's a language issue. So I was at AT&T for a while, and it was like the king of acronyms. And depending on which organization you were talking to, the same acronym had a totally different meaning. So when you draw pictures, you can start to get people on the same page.
I think Salesforce might have you be on the king of acronyms. We have dictionaries on dictionaries on dictionaries. I don't know what half of them mean, and I don't ever pretend to. That's why there's a dictionary.
Absolutely.
But so on that same topic, what are your guys' recommendations for books you can read when encouraging teams to start like a design thinking frame of mind, or any websites? Do you guys have any like favorites off the top of your head that you can let everyone know? Olivia, we'll go with you.
So I'm happy. In a moment, I'll share in the chat. I have a whole like book reading list of different design thinking books, but one I love is called Designing Your Life, and it's design thinking for your personal life. So it's not the same as necessarily taking that approach into your workplace, but how can you design think yourself into a better life? And so I'm happy to share a bit of a reading list where I've compiled some other design thinking books. But that one I would highly recommend because it helps understand the concept and the methodology, but apply it to your own personal self first, and then you can take it out into the world.
I love that. So for me, my Bible, when I first got started in design thinking, right, because my day, it was just human-centered design. So this is that on steroids. But it was the Google Venture Sprint book. I loved it because it was bite-sized pieces. It was very actionable. You dedicate 5 days, let's go, right? The book also comes with an app. So, on the fly, you can just pull it out and make sure you're going the right direction. But I still suggest that book to everyone who's interested in design thinking.
So on that same note, what kind of tools for sketching or classes would you guys recommend that you personally have been through or you've used maybe?
You don't need a class for sketching. Circle, square, triangle, line. That is it. But I will, let me look and see if I have probably one of the, I'm not on my computer because it died right before this, but I'll see if I can find the little worksheet on it. But literally circle, square, triangle, and line.
I am writing that quote down. That's great. I love it.
And I would say, I would add to that. So when you're creating these rough drawings and doing your sketches, there's a lot of great tools out there then like Miro, Venn-Gage that can help you take your design thinking, your ideation documents and put them into something that can be communicated upwards or outwards. So once you've gone through some of those phases and you've put that on your white paper and you've done your rough draft and you've got something that really works, there's a lot of great tools out there that I like to use to then put it into something that you could take to your client or end user and say, hey, does this resonate with what we've been talking about? Does this resonate with you and your challenges? Is this what your journey looks like? So I think there's a lot of great ways that you can take those low fidelity pieces of artwork that you've created and put them into something that's beautiful and shareable.
Yes, we definitely need those for people who have failed art. So on that same topic, if there are multiple solutions to a problem, what strategies should we follow to evaluate the designs that we have? And Adrian, we'll go with you on this one.
Edward de Bono's 6 Thinking Hats. Okay. So that is a book. It's also a framework for critiquing. So a lot of times when you're going through kind of this evaluation process, you have all of these thoughts at one time, and you're not really necessarily, a lot of times it's not productive conversation. But with Edward de Bono's 6 Thinking Hats, you have to put on each of these different hats. So one comes at it from a very technical standpoint, right? It either is or it isn't. One of them is criticism. Sometimes, especially women are slow to criticize because we don't want to come across as mean. Put on your black hat and be as mean as hell, right? And then eventually you put on like your red, and there's 6 of them, right? But then your red hat is your emotional. I just feel like this is the right way to go, right? And it lets you get into a very specific mindset as you're critiquing these ideas. It's one of my favorites.
Olivia, do you have anything to add?
And I would also just add, it's about bringing those challenges and those solutions back to your end user and actually working with them to say, is this the challenge you're facing? Is this the solution that seems like a viable fit to help solve your challenge? And really just working with them to dig deeper in that problem. Often we will, again, make assumptions about what the cause of our challenge is. And it can take a bit of deeper digging to figure out what those kind of underlying causes are and be able to really get to the root of the problem we're facing and find the best solution for that.
Great. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about people that really don't believe in design thinking. So how have you found to be the most receptive and the least receptive, or sorry, let's rephrase that. Who in an organization have you found to be more receptive or least receptive when it comes to design thinking? What partners, like within a big company or even when you're working with smaller clients, how do you navigate the most and least receptive type people? Olivia, do you want to start?
Sure. So, I mean, there is, with anything, skepticism with anything new, definitely. And Adrian, I'm sure you'll agree that throughout your career, there's been a definite learning curve and a bit more of a socialization around design thinking. But I think it comes back to, it never hurts to better understand people. And so explaining that forward. That being said, I often do a lot of work with the federal government. They're not necessarily putting out a product that we're using, but their citizens are their end users. So I found that they've been a tougher group to socialize to this. Often we think of design thinking in more product design. So pulling it back to, no, this can be in your services, your processes. How are you delivering to your citizens, who are your end users when you're a government employee?
Adrian?
So there are 2 people I look out for in every project that I do. One is the birther of the idea. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they are sensitive. Okay. We say this thing, I have to tell people their baby is ugly. The birther of the idea does not want to hear anything that sounds like they made a mistake. Okay. And from, being someone who is leading in a design thinking effort, you have to be conscious and aware of that. We have to approach these things with empathy as well. So they don't want to hear that they messed up, or they don't want to hear maybe their idea needs some tweaking. So that's one. The other group that tends to give me some challenges are those people who have gone through other frameworks. So we did Six Sigma, we did this, we did that, we did this. How is this going to be any different? Or isn't this just another flavor of those things? And it's like, yeah, it is. But we're going to be very focused and intentional. And we're actually going to do something you should have been doing from the beginning, which is actually involving the audience and the user that you're designing for.
And Adrian, I'm going to point out that link that you submitted in the chat, the bonfire link, the WIC Digital Summit memorabilia. Can't say that word at all. And it's so funny because if you guys click on that link, which I just posted in the chat again, this is like design thinking here. If you read our like technical team chats, like you're on mute. Like we crowdsourced a way to like bring this idea to life. And Holly, someone on our team, was super good in delivering like our thoughts and ideas into this product. And I've run a lot of these panels, and I cannot tell you the number of times I've said you're on mute during the last 3 days.
He said it to me earlier.
I did, yeah. If I had a sign that I could just like pull up and say you're on mute, you're gonna catch my drift, and everyone, not even the person on mute, is gonna make sure they're not on mute. So that's design thinking like at its best. But to keep on that same topic, let's talk about when you have many stakeholders with different ideas and feedback, how do you balance everyone's thoughts? Because, you're going to get 100 people with 100 different ideas. Where do you draw the line? What's your first step in doing that? And I'm not sure who went first last time. So the other person goes first.
Adrian, you take us away first on that.
Let's go for it. Yep, you're up, Adrian.
So that's the best part about design thinking is focus on the experience you want to create for your end user, right? If everybody can focus on the fact, so this is what I tell people. Listen, the customer pays our bills, okay? So if we can focus on making the best experience for our customers, sometimes that means everybody's not the focus or attention. Sometimes that means we have to help this group be more successful than this. That means some people get bigger parts of the pie than others. But if we focus and rally around, we want to make the best experience for the person we're designing for, then you shouldn't have an issue. It's when we want to be internal that we run into those kind of problems.
And Olivia?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Adrian. I think anytime you can come at something, whether it be the Women in Cloud Summit or any other project you're working on, but with a common goal that you all agree, our goal here is to deliver the best possible outcome for our end user, the best end-to-end experience for our summit attendees, the best product for our tech users, whatever that looks like. I think when you can come together with that common goal, it's helpful. But when it comes to having a ton of different ideas, I think that goes back to that psychological safe zone, creating that zone where no idea is a bad idea. When someone says something, write it down. I've had people give absolutely bizarre ideas when it comes to brainstorming, but sometimes those can help you build onto something more viable. So your idea of X is a little wonky, but how could we twist that on and make it something that would really work for our end user? So I would just say never rule out an idea. You never know what kind of further discussion or further developments it can spark for you.
And that's like that Edward de Bono's kind of in any kind of framework for how you critique. That's why that's so important, because typically we want to shoot ideas down so fast, and it's like, but wait, there might be something there that we can use, and that's what makes it successful.
So let's talk about 2020 and COVID. How has design thinking changed from you're in person, you're designing for obviously like one-to or human interactions, but now we're gone all virtual reality, all online. How no one knows this answer, so I'm hoping both of you do. Like, how do we design think for this whole online atmosphere and this whole new world?
I think design thinking is a fabulous tool for pivoting, which many of us have had to do during this pandemic. And it can really help you see, okay, what was working in the real world? How can we keep that? And how can we recreate it in the virtual world? So even right down to, I've had to take all my design thinking courses virtually. So how can I create the best experience for my design thinking students when it's virtual, when we aren't in a classroom with whiteboards all over the walls and big white sheets of paper? How can we create that environment? So we've looked at a ton of different tools. We're, whiteboarding in Zoom. We're breaking out in breakout rooms. So trying to think about what you need to maintain from the real world and how you can replicate that digitally.
So for me and my company, watching this unfold was like nothing short of amazing. It was, you have to break up with business as usual because that's no longer an option, right? So Olivia said, what are the parts of this that we have to keep? And then how do we satisfy these other needs? There was nothing, so it's not even starting design thinking in 2021. A lot of companies just had to pivot in 2020, right? You think about like the restaurant industry. If you could not figure out how to get your menu and your ordering online, you probably don't exist today, right? I have a couple of companies, some retailers, same thing. They didn't have a process for how are they going to get things from a store to a person, had no idea, but COVID made them figure it out. And it goes back to basics. We need our customers to get these things. This is what's stopping them. How are we going to get there? And it was fast. So nobody can tell me they can't do it because we watched everybody do it in 2020.
And I think to Adrian's point, a lot of people had to jump to a quick solution. But design thinking is all about prototyping and testing and figuring out what works and what elements work and what don't. So you can fail quickly and not waste a ton of time and money trying things. So if you started with laminated menus so that they could be easily wiped down when COVID hit, and then realized that was adding an extra layer to your employee's workday. So maybe then you pushed into the QR code menu. So again, it's about trying things and being ready to fail fast and see what elements of your solutions work and can help build a better solution and what elements you just need to nix altogether.
And I will add, so Olivia, you've probably seen this, and that's one of the things that we have to get people comfortable with. You have to be okay not knowing. You have to be okay failing, right? The only thing you can't do is not learn from that. But you have to get very comfortable being uncomfortable. And for many of us overachievers, not knowing, and just trying to take that step out on faith is uncomfortable. But if we put it out into practice in some form, right, whether it's some sort of prototype testing or unfortunately real life, put it out into production, let's see what happens. And you learn from that, then that's okay. It's not a failure as long as you get back up again.
So a quick yes or no from both of you. Is it safe to say that 2020 really helped push design thinking forward?
I would say yes. I think people are looking for ways to validate their solutions or to help them come up with solutions altogether. And I think design thinking is a great tool for that. And those who have heard of it but were maybe skeptical are starting to come around to seeing the benefits. And those who had never heard of it are looking for something like design thinking and have then stumbled upon it.
I would say the same. So, of course, when the pandemic hit, research is usually the first expense that people kind of table to the next year, right? Research and design. And it's like, oh, no, well, wait, this year they didn't have that option. So in my business, we were sitting there like, oh, we may not have work for a few months. And the phone started ringing immediately. Like, we have to figure this out right now. So absolutely. It pushed we have to know our users. We have to know what they need. We need to know what gaps we're missing, and we need to fix it.
So this is an out-of-the-box question, but it's very specific for a user. So would design thinking be good for building something like a museum or conference center? We are targeting local tourists, citizens, and businesses. So there's a lot of stakeholders to keep in mind. So how can you use design thinking to conceptualize, a museum or a conference center? Adrian, I'll let you take this one.
It's the exact same process. So it's starting with, what is the vision? Why do you even want this conference center? Why do we need it, right? What are we trying to get from it? Then defining who your users are or your audience. Who are we doing this for? And then, start to break them down. So going back to what Olivia said, those personas, everybody is coming here for something, and then understanding what those people need. And it's the same exact process. The outcome is just really big and pretty.
And I would add to that, design thinking is great for looking at what already exists and how you can improve upon it. So look at the journey that you would take in any other museum or conference center, and where are you having issues? Where are you facing challenges? Where are the users that you're building for facing challenges, and how can you then create something that alleviates those pain points?
And then I would add to that, one thing that you need to think about with design thinking is you may go through an entire, project cycle and realize we have more questions. We don't know everything. So now we got to go back, and that's fine. You may also find that what you thought was one working stream is now going to become 4 or 5, and that's also fine. So it's, just kind of letting your audience and this alignment lead you versus we just want to do something.
So in that same mindset, is design thinking only for these big complex problems like building a museum or building a conference center? How can design thinking be used for the smaller issues? Olivia?
So I have a great example for those of you who have been attending the Women in Cloud Summit over the last few days. Yes, the whole thing, which is a big, beautiful event, we brought in design thinking all the way of how can we give our end users, our attendees, the best experience. But I think it also comes back to the little things. Having those coffee and juice bars, what are we missing? Having those little things like the workbook. So looking at those individual small challenges that our users are facing, they're missing connection. How can we build an opportunity for people to connect? So I think it can be applied to the smallest piece of any puzzle, the smallest puzzle, or to a big, hairy problem or challenge, if you will.
So Olivia mentioned mentioned one thing earlier. She talked about, design thinking for your life. So, in January, we have all of these, things that we want to get done. Break those things down. Why do you want to get it done? What are you doing it for? What are the gaps you're trying to fill, and how are you going to do it? The other thing I did is because of kind of the pandemic and the change to virtual learning, I took my son out of a brick and mortar school and put him into a virtual learning atmosphere. One of the things that I get to see because of that are his gaps, and he doesn't really think big, right? So like creative writing is a challenge. So I did what I know best. Let's pull out these sticky notes, right? And let's start to think about, what are you trying to accomplish? Who are you writing this for? What are some of those big ideas? And then give it to me, because I'm going to be your audience. I'm going to critique it. I'm going to help you rework it. And then you go do it again. So I've now taught my son design thinking so that he can get through his homework without me pulling my hair out.
Yeah, I really think once you start to understand design thinking, you'll start to apply it everywhere. So I look at, my journey through the grocery store from a design thinking perspective. How could this be a better journey for me? How could this be a better journey for other people, other fellow shoppers? And then looking at those elements like self-checkout, for example. Those kinds of things came to be because we've watched how people are behaving and where their frustrations are, and how we can dissolve those frustrations with new technologies, processes, procedures, whatever that is.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I saw one of those talks earlier, and they were talking about self-awareness and leadership, and you can also use this process for that. So if you're managing a team, you can start to, let me go back and have these conversations. What do you need? What are your gaps? And then kind of rework your strategy. So you can apply design thinking basically everything.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that the wine aisle is next to the ice cream aisle in most grocery stores. They know when you're getting that wine, you're going to get that ice cream too.
One of my favorite examples of design thinking, and I know my mom's probably out here like she's going to say the paper towel example, but if anyone recognizes that, paper towels, you can do the half sheets now. That was actually created by Procter & Gamble, who apply design thinking, and they went into people's homes and they watched them use their products. So that came from watching often moms rip the full-size sheet of paper towel in half because they didn't want to waste a bunch of it. So how can we create a product as simple as paper towel? How can we improve upon something so basic and create a better product for our end users? Oh, we can make it select a size. Seems so simple, but that came from watching people use their product and figure out where are they facing difficulties, or where aren't they getting the most out of this product.
Well, shout out to Joanne. We love her. And to Deborah. So let's keep on that whole track of design thinking. What if we get off track? How do we get back on track with it? And Adrienne, I'll let you take this one.
So when you're going through this process, regardless if you're doing this for your own self or you're doing this for a team or even at enterprise level, it's important to make artifacts. And one of those artifacts should be, what are we here to do, right? Who are we here to try to solve a problem for? So state your problem. And as you're creating those artifacts, you go back to them. So for my teams, we print them out. I want you to look at it. I want you to see it. If my team is getting off track, hey, remember you said we wanted to do this. So how do we get back there? So it's making sure that you continue to come back to and align on what is the mission? Why are we here? What are we trying to get out of it?
Yeah, I would totally second that. I think coming back to those personas, it always, if you find yourself becoming disaligned or jumping off track, bring it back to those people that you're trying to create a solution for. So as Adrienne said, we'll create our personas and we'll literally assign someone to be the guardian of that persona. So if I'm the guardian of the mom persona, since we're using mom examples, every time I go through a different phase of the designing process, I'll represent that person. Well, that's a great idea, Blake, but how is it solving my problem as a mom? That might be a great solution for you as a young professional student. But how does that come back to serve the end user that I'm representing? So I think Adrienne's right. It's carrying those pieces forward and always just bringing your thoughts and your focus back to the person you're trying to solve for.
I would also add keeping the spirit of inclusion, right? So don't forget those stakeholders. Don't just kind of, because you break off into these working teams sometimes and you get disconnected. But now we need to make sure that we're keeping those touch points, whether there's some sort of a check-in, whether it's a stand-up, whatever that needs to be. But you need to keep those lines of communication open. And continue working and partnering with each other. It's when people feel like they're no longer heard or they're somehow forgotten that it starts to go kind of off the track.
And Adrienne, you said my favorite word, inclusion. So how can organizations and the government use design thinking to improve access for women in tech? Olivia, you're up.
So again, I think it's coming back to putting yourself in the shoes of those women in tech and personifying them. And there's going to be multiple personas. Yes, it's women in tech, but who are all the different groups of women in tech? How do each of them stand up and bring themselves forward? And what do they need to be successful? What kind of access do they need? So some people might need financial access. Some people might need a seat at the table. Some women in tech might need to eliminate contract biases. They each are facing different challenges and some common challenges. But it, again, goes back to talking to those end users, getting to know them, figuring out what challenges they're facing and not just assuming the access they need and really getting to understand what they're looking for.
So I would be willing to bet that a lot of the content that they would need to understand the end users is there, right? What I would need the government to do is start acting, right? So what are these programs that we can put in place and start prototyping them, start on a smaller scale, start at the city level, start at the state level, and then start to add to them. And as these programs work, then make it bigger and a national thing. I don't know that we're starting from zero when it comes to women's issues, access issues, equality and inclusion. Now we need actual programs. And then, and events like, not even events, movements like this help, but we just need to start acting.
So the last question before we go into final thoughts, how do you both design for one and be intersectional? So for example, the mom persona, how do you thoughtfully represent single moms, co-parenting moms, moms with disabilities, moms who face different oppressions? Like, how do you take the mom persona and like break it down and still, encompass everyone?
I would say just like that. You would have your single mom persona. You would have your mom with a disability persona. You actually, so again, it comes back to, as Adrienne said, you might find more questions you need to answer as you get into the design thinking process. You might say, my end users are moms, easy. And that's going to break that down into, okay, well, a mom isn't just one person. A mom can make up a ton of different people. The same with your tech end user. I'm designing a cell phone. Well, who are all the different people who are going to be using my cell phone, and breaking those down into the groups that you need to focus on?
What I like to do is I like to create needs-based personas. Because especially when you start designing, thinking about the mom, right? There are so many different types of moms. but a lot of our needs are the same. So if I can take the work that Olivia has talked about regarding the personas and now say, you know what, here are these needs, and these needs look just like these needs, and these needs look just like these needs. Now I'm going to design for those needs, not necessarily that person, because we can talk about, you know, a mom all day, but there may be a single father who has the exact same needs, right? So I like to move those to the next level and make them needs-based.
Absolutely. I would second that. I think needs and behaviors. What are the things that they're doing, and where are we seeing similar behaviors, and where might their behaviors have to differ? So when it comes to things like physical accessibility, that would be where a behavior might differ, or a need may differ slightly.
Okay, and I said it was the last question, but speaking of moms, we have a question from a mom, from Joanne. Okay, here, Olivia, here's your question. After you have taught clients how to apply design thinking to solve challenges, develop business solutions, do they often reach out to you about success stories? And if they do, we'll close it out with both of you giving me like one success story if you have it in terms of design thinking, and then we'll go into final thoughts. You're up, Olivia.
All right, Mom, for your question. Thank you for asking. I think, yes, often people come back with those success stories. They come back with ways they've implemented design thinking. So I have a colleague now named Kim who started in one of my design thinking courses like 2 years ago, took a one-day kind of crash course. She works for the city of Ottawa in Canada. She loved what she learned so much. She followed up with a 5-day more intensive course. She then took that back to the city, created a whole pilot program around waste disposal using technology to track it. And now she teaches courses with me where she actually brings that example back up and shows the personas that she created with her team at the city of Ottawa and helps deliver that to future design thinkers, up and coming design thinkers. So that's both a success story, but also a really cool way of how you might do something one time for a minute. Maybe it's, you know, designing your grocery shopping routine or your commute to work. And then you may take that into your office and you may apply it to your workplace scenario. And then you may take it to a greater scale or actually start to share those tips and those tricks with your colleagues so that they can design think as well. So I think it's like a virus in a good way that once you show the power of it, it really starts to spread and it helps for other people to see the value in it as well.
So mine doesn't sound like a success story, but it is when you think about the time and money we did not waste. So I worked for some product owners who wanted to come up with a different concept. And after going through the design thinking process, they decided we don't need to do this, right? It's not good for our business. It's not going to represent what we want to be. We can use this energy on other products. And that doesn't sound like a win, but it absolutely is, because sometimes at the end of a design thinking project, the answer is no, don't do that. And the fact that we were able to get there, to me, is definitely a win.
Okay, so here are our final thoughts. Now, final thought, you have to also give one action that someone can take today to either further their learning with design thinking, maybe how to get started with design thinking, but just like one action we can give someone to take away from the already great content that we have. And Adrian, I'm going to go with you first.
So I'm biased, right? But you cannot do design thinking without user research or understanding the people who are part of the process, okay? So I would recommend 2 books. The first one is Stephen Krug's Don't Make Me Think. And that is as basic as you can get, right? You don't want to make anything too difficult. So whether you're designing for nonprofit or the government or enterprise, it's some basic things that you need to know about how to learn from people. The second one is, you've already done that, is to go ahead and get that Google Venture Sprint book and just try it. Take the concepts day by day and apply it to something in your life and see, you know, did I make the progress that I wanted to make? What parts of this did I not understand? And if you want to, you can reach out to me and we can talk about it all day. I love everything about kind of finding those gaps and holes.
And I would say my final thought is very similar and but very simple. Just come away with this, I hope, with more empathy. How can you walk into the next challenge you're trying to solve, whether it be at home or at work, or in the world? And how can you take a more empathetic lens to that challenge? So I would say if you can take one thing away from today, it's how will you bring more empathy into your life? So the next time you're facing a challenge, think about the people that are impacted and involved, and add that empathetic lens.
I know we have behind the scenes staff taking pictures of us during this presentation. So I'm going to give us all a chance to smile, and I'm going to take a picture for us so we can have a good smiling picture instead of us just talking. So on 3, I'm going to have you guys smile. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you both so much. This is one of my favorite Ask the Expert sessions. We will be in the lobby if you guys have any additional questions. Also, go to womeninCloud.com/get-introduced if you want to get introduced with either of these speakers, and we'll see you next time. One more question. We have 2 more Ask the Expert sessions coming up: inclusive leadership and how to secure investor funding. Make sure to go check the Hay Summit website to find out details. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.